There is a book in a farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, that is not for sale at any price. It is not published. It has never been digitized. No library holds a copy. No academic has cataloged it. It is a handwritten record, started by a great-great-grandmother in 1887, continued by every generation since, that contains the accumulated practical knowledge of a family's relationship with their land, their animals, their food systems, their building methods, their plant medicines, and their community. It describes which field grows the best garlic and why. It describes the exact composition of the soil amendment that doubled their wheat yield in 1923. It describes the fermentation culture that has been running continuously since 1891 and what to do when it goes flat. It describes the lime-wash ratio that kept their foundation dry through the flood years of 1936. It describes the first frost date their specific microclimate experiences, tracked annually for over a century, which runs 11 days later than the official county average. It describes the herb preparation that their great-grandmother used for lung infections, that the current grandmother still uses, and that has never failed in 4 generations of family memory. That book is worth more than anything on their property, more than the land, more than the house, more than every physical system described across 17 previous videos, because every physical system can be rebuilt if destroyed. The knowledge in that book cannot be rebuilt if it is lost. It can only be transmitted or it disappears. I have been to 17 farms. I have sat at 17 kitchen tables. I have walked 17 root cellars, and 17 barns, and 17 garden plots, and 17 fermentation shelves. I have put my hand on 17 masonry heaters, and felt the warmth stored from a fire that went out hours before I arrived. I have tasted 17 families' sauerkraut from 17 mother brines that run in unbroken biological continuity, from grandmother to grandchild. And across all 17 visits, I asked the same question at the end of every conversation. What does all of this cost you? Not individually, everything together. What does it cost you every year to live the way you live? The answers varied. Some families kept more detailed records than others. Some systems were more fully developed than others. But the range of answers converged around a number that I did not expect when I started asking the question. A number I have been calculating and recalculating across 17 videos of documented costs and savings and projections. A number that the Amish families themselves have never calculated because they have never needed to, because they were never paying the bills on the other side of the comparison. The number is $1.2 million. $1.2 million. That is the estimated lifetime financial difference, from age 25 to age 75, between a household running the complete Amish system on a standard residential property and a household running the standard American system on the same property. Not savings in a 30-year mortgage window, across a working lifetime of 50 years, across 2 generations of intentional system building and maintenance. Before I break down how I calculated it, I want to tell you something about where that number comes from. Not the math, the origin, because the $1.2 million does not represent what the Amish system earns. It represents what the industrial system charges, and the industrial system charges it for something it did not create. The earth beneath your house has been at 55 degrees since before human beings arrived on this continent. The rain has been falling on your roof since the house was built. The lactobacillus has been on every cabbage leaf since before cabbages were cultivated. The clay in your subsoil has been there since the last glaciation. The hardwood logs in your neighbor's yard have been growing for 40 years. The sun has been rising on your south-facing roof since the day you moved in. None of these things were created by any industry. None of them were manufactured. None of them were engineered. They are what the earth provides to any person willing to maintain a relationship with them. The industrial system did not create the earth's temperature, the rainfall, the fermentation biology, the clay, the wood, the sunlight. It created the infrastructure that made you dependent on purchased alternatives to those things. It created the regulatory framework that classified the free things as insufficient or illegal. It created the curriculum that stopped teaching you how to use the free things. It created the marketing that associated the purchased alternatives with modernity and progress, and the free things with poverty and primitivism. And then it charged you $1.2 million over your lifetime for the things it convinced you that you could not live without. The Amish were not convinced, not because they are stubborn, because the free things kept working. The earth kept cooling the air through the buried pipe. The rain kept filling the cistern. The lactobacillus kept fermenting the cabbage. The clay kept making walls that were warm in January and cool in August. The sun kept warming the stone that released the heat through the night. The things the industrial system told you were insufficient never failed to work for the families that kept using them. The things the industrial system sold as necessary replacements failed constantly, wore out on schedule, required service contracts and monthly payments, and replacement parts from manufacturers whose continued operation you were structurally required to depend on. $1,200,000, not in investments, not in a retirement account. In the absence of bills that the industrial system requires you to pay and that the Amish system makes unnecessary. In the presence of food that you produced and water you collected and heat that stored itself in stone, and power that came from a stream, and medicine that grew in the garden and community that showed up when the barn burned. I want to be precise about how I calculated this number because precision matters, and because I want you to be able to verify every component. Energy costs over 50 years. The average American household spends approximately $2,200 per year on energy. Over 50 years with modest annual rate increases, approximately $130,000. The Amish household running the complete thermal and generation system reduces that expenditure by 80 to 90%. Net savings, $104,000 to $117,000. Water costs over 50 years. The average American household spends approximately $100 per year on water and sewer. Over 50 years, $65,000. The rainwater cistern, spring or driven point well, and gray water management reduces municipal dependency by 60 to 80%. Net savings, $39,000 to $52,000. Food costs over 50 years. The average American household of 4 spends approximately $9,000 per year on food. Over 50 years, $450,000. The complete Amish production system, intensive beds, fermentation, dairy animals, laying flock, mushroom logs, and perennial fruit, covers 50 to 70% of food needs. Net savings, $225,000 to $315,000. Healthcare costs over 50 years. The average American family spends approximately $13,000 per year. Over 50 years, $650,000. The Amish household with lower chronic disease rates reduces healthcare expenditure to approximately $2,000 to $4,000 per year. Net savings, $450,000 to $550,000. Pest control over 50 years. The average household spends $612 per year. Over 50 years, $30,600. The diatomaceous earth system reduces this to approximately $50 per year. Net savings, $2,100. Soil amendments and garden inputs over 50 years. Average household, $240 per year. Over 50 years, $12,000. The biochar and biological management system reduces purchased inputs to near zero after establishment. Net savings, $12,000. Supplements over 50 years. Average American adult, $900 per year. Household of 4 across 50 years, $180,000. The fermentation, mushroom, raw dairy, and pasture egg system replaces the primary supplement categories. Net savings, $120,000 to $150,000. Building maintenance over 50 years. The linseed oil, lime wash, and cob system dramatically extends maintenance cycles. Net savings compared to standard synthetic programs, $30,000 to $40,000. Community mutual aid replacing insurance, $150,000 to $200,000. Summing the conservative estimates across all categories. Total, $158,100. At the midpoint of the ranges across all categories, approximately $1.2 million. That is the number. One approach outsources every need to an industrial system. The other maintains self-sustaining relationships. The difference is $1.2 million. That $1.2 million does not disappear. It goes somewhere. Specifically, it goes to the electric utility, the water utility, the grocery supply chain, the pharmaceutical industry, the commercial food system, the pest control industry, the insurance industry, the financial services industry, and the professional services sector that provide the alternatives to what the Amish system produces internally. Those industries collectively receive $1.2 million over 50 years from the household that outsources what the Amish household produces for itself, not because those industries are evil, because that is what the industrial model costs when you calculate it honestly across a lifetime, rather than month by month. Now I want to tell you the thing I have been most careful about saying. I have been careful to be accurate and fair. I have not been careful to be comfortable. This final thing is the one that some portion of this audience is not going to want to hear. It is not about what industry did to you. It is about what you can do now. The $1.2 million calculation does not care. The past is fixed. The $1.2 million is not fixed. It is still being spent month by every household. Every month you have not installed the first flush diverter on your downspout. The water falls on your roof and runs into the storm drain. You pay the water company for water that falls on your house for free. Every month you have not applied lime wash to your foundation. You run a dehumidifier against a surface that a $4 bag of powder would have made inhospitable to mold. Every month you have not started your fermentation culture. You buy the pasteurized approximation of what salt and thyme would produce for you. Every month you have not inoculated your mushroom logs. You buy the nutritional shadow of what a hardwood log would produce for free. The knowledge is not the barrier. The barrier is the decision to begin, not to complete the entire system simultaneously, to begin one element, this weekend, with whatever materials are closest to hand and whatever time is available. There are two economies running simultaneously. The industrial economy that charges you for everything it can make you dependent on, and the biological economy that provides everything you are willing to maintain a relationship with. The biological economy is older, quieter, more resilient. The earth tube cools the air whether or not the HVAC Association has approved it. The lactobacillus ferments the cabbage. The mycorrhizal network builds soil fertility, whether or not the fertilizer company funded a study showing it is insufficient. The biological economy operates on physical and biological laws. No industry has the leverage to change those laws. The 18th video is where you stop being convinced entirely and start being the person who understands both economies well. You now know which one compounds in your favor and which one compounds in someone else's. The person who compounds in their own favor is the person who starts the book today and puts the first entry in it before the day ends. The person who compounds in someone else's favor is the person who found this series interesting and moved on to the next video in their feed. They thought about starting something and did not start anything, and paid the water bill, and bought probiotic supplements that cost 30 times the sauerkraut brine. The $1.2 million does not go to the person who finds the series interesting. It goes to the person who starts the book today. I want to give you the calculation in reverse, not the 50-year aggregate. The individual first action and its return over your property ownership, the lime wash application to a foundation. Materials cost $22. Time, 1 weekend. Mold remediation costs prevented across 20 years, $1,600. Dehumidifier electricity eliminated across 20 years, $8,000. Total return on 22 over 20 years, $9,600. 436 times the material cost. The first flush diverter and 275-gallon collection barrel. Materials cost, $175. Time, 1 afternoon. Irrigation water provided across 20 years. Municipal water cost eliminated, approximately $350 per year. Total return over 20 years, $7,000. 40 times the material cost. From 1 afternoon. The 12 mushroom logs inoculated with shiitake spawn. Materials, $42. Logs free. Annual fresh yield across 7 years, 144 pounds per year. At retail prices, $152 per year. Over 7 years, 8,064s. Return on $42 investment, 192 times. The single mason jar of sauerkraut. Materials cost, 0.40. Time, 20 minutes. Monthly production potential, $30 to $50 per month in grocery equivalents. Over 20 years, $7,200 to $12,000. Return on the initial 0.40. Effectively infinite because the culture compounds indefinitely as the practice continues. These are not investment returns. They are the returns on restored relationships with things that were always there. The rain that the barrel captures was always falling. The mushroom that the log produces was always growable. The fermentation was always possible. The relationships were always available. They just were not being maintained. And not maintaining them costs $1.2 million across a lifetime. I want to address the person thinking that $1.2 million is an exaggeration, that the numbers are cherry-picked, or the system requires too much sacrifice. To that person I would say, go back to video 1. Check the Oak Ridge National Laboratory data on ground temperature. Check the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory studies. Check the Baltimore Ordnance outcomes. Check the Weston A. Price Foundation survey data. The research is real. Every institution I have cited is verifiable. The calculation may be on the high end, but it is not fabricated. Even at half the calculated value, $600,000 over a lifetime from a materials investment under $10,000, the case for beginning is overwhelming. $1.2 million is not a promise. It is a calculation. What you do with the calculation is the only question left to answer. The Amish family in Lancaster County is not thinking about $1.2 million today. They are thinking about Tuesday. They are thinking about the fermentation jar and the mushroom log and the cistern that is full from the weekend rain. They are thinking about the notebook that needs an entry about the first frost date they observed this morning, consistent with the pattern since 1887. That is what $1.2 million looks like from the inside, not a number. Tuesday, the rhythm of a household that produces more than it consumes, the inheritance that compounds whether or not it is calculated, the knowledge that outlasts the knowing because someone started the book in 1887. Every generation since has added to it, and the book is still on the shelf and the systems are still running, and the barn is standing. When it burned, 300 people came and it was back within 2 days. Nobody called an insurance adjuster because the community is the insurance. That is the complete story. One decision. The decision is yours. The knowledge is now yours. The notebook is waiting. The sun is on the roof. It does not need your permission to continue. It needs your attention. Give it your attention. Start today. Write the first entry tonight. The $1.2 million is not a promise. It is a calculation. It assumes consistent practice. It assumes the systems are maintained and not abandoned. It assumes the knowledge is transmitted to the next generation, so the investment compounds across 2 generations rather than depreciating when the knowledge dies. The maintenance is 4 to 6 hours per week, less time than the average American spends watching television in a single day. I want to address the person who is 50 years old thinking they started too late, that the compounding they have missed cannot be recovered. To that person, the calculation from today to age 75 is still $600,000, half the number because you have half the time to compound. The lime wash applied this month prevents mold for 25 years. The fermentation culture started this week, produces living food for 25 years. The mushroom logs inoculated this fall produce food for 7 years. The systems do not care when you started. They begin compounding the first day. The financial number represents a household not dependent on an industrial system for biological needs. Relationships with land and biology that cannot be disrupted. The grandmother who started the book was not 25. She was a grown woman who understood what she knew was worth writing down. It is never too late to begin the book. It is only too late to have started earlier, which is no reason not to start now. The Amish family did not calculate the $1.2 million. They did not need to. They knew the systems worked because their parents knew. Their great-grandparents brought the knowledge from Germany and Switzerland and built it into the Pennsylvania soil 200 years ago. The knowledge has been running continuously and producing continuously since before anyone currently alive in those families was born. You are starting later than they did. You have 17 videos, a notebook, and the knowledge that the first action pays for itself. The Amish family's great-great-grandmother had exactly the same starting position. She had knowledge, a piece of land, and the decision to begin. She started the book in 1887. 4 generations later, the book is still on the shelf, and the systems are still running. You cannot start in 1887. You can start today. The 1.2 million begins accumulating from the first action taken, not the decision. The compounding begins whenever the first jar is sealed, the first tube goes into the ground, and the first log is inoculated. The calculation was necessary. You needed to see the number to understand the scale of what has been taken from the average household. The Amish family is not managing their systems because of the number. They are fermenting sauerkraut because it is Tuesday. They do it because their grandmother did it. The culture is alive, the family is fed, and the knowledge is in the book. The barn is standing because 300 people came when it burned. This community cannot be disrupted because they show up for each other. The 1.2 million is what the relationship is worth in the language of the system. In the language of the people, it is simply Tuesday. The industrial system spent a century making sure you never found this knowledge. Now, what you do with it is finally yours. The book is waiting for the first entry. The jar is waiting for the cabbage. The sun is already on the roof. Start today, before the knowing fades back into the noise of the world. The Amish started, and they never stopped. Start the book, build the system, maintain the relationships, transmit the knowledge, the rest compounds on its own.